At 1:47 hours on June 6, 1944, First Lieutenant Richard Winters tumbled through black Norman sky at 600 feet, watching tracer fire crisscross the darkness like deadly fireworks. He was 26 years old. He had 18 months of paratrooper training. He had 0 combat experience. He had 12 seconds before his parachute deployed. The C-47 carrying his commanding officer had just exploded behind him. Standard procedure called for orienting, rallying at the drop zone, and then proceeding to the objective. He had no weapon. He had no idea where he was. In 90 minutes, 21,000 Americans would wade onto Utah Beach straight into German artillery fire, unless someone stopped those guns first. 13,100 American paratroopers jumped into Normandy that night. 75% landed nowhere near their drop zones. 2,499 would become casualties within 24 hours. The 82nd Airborne lost 697 men killed on D-Day alone. This was 8.7% of their entire force. They were dead in one day. The numbers were simple. The numbers were brutal. Every C-47 transport carried 17 to 18 paratroopers. German 88mm flak cannons fired 15 to 20 rounds per minute. At 600 feet altitude, pilots had maybe 8 seconds to evade after taking fire. They did not evade. 18 C-47s were shot down completely. 115 more suffered catastrophic damage. Over 2,000 paratroopers rode those planes through sheets of anti-aircraft fire. The math did not favor survival. Lieutenant Thomas Meehan III, 26 years old, commanded Easy Company. His C-47 took a direct hit at 1:15 hours near Beuzeville-au-Plain. The transport exploded midair. 18 men died instantly. Meehan was gone, along with his entire headquarters section. Staff sergeants, radio operators, and medics were also lost. They were all gone. Easy Company suddenly had no command structure. It had no leadership. There was no plan. Only scattered paratroopers were falling through enemy fire toward uncertain ground. If you want to see how one lieutenant turned this disaster into victory, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to show this story to more people who need to hear it. The plan was elegant on paper. 3 Pathfinder teams would drop 30 minutes ahead of the main force. They would mark drop zones with Eureka radar beacons and holophane lights. Following C-47s would home in on these signals. Paratroopers would land in tight groups, rally quickly, and then move to their objectives. It was a beautiful plan. However, the weather destroyed it. Cloud banks stretched across the Cotentin Peninsula. Visibility was less than 200 yards. Pilots could not see their landmarks. They could not see the coastline. They could not even see the E, Pathfinder lights, when they worked. German flak made the situation worse. Every transport squadron flew at 600 feet to avoid radar detection. This was a perfect altitude for ground fire. The Germans knew this. When the flak started, pilots took evasive action. They dove. They climbed. They turned hard left and right. Consequently, the formations broke apart. C-47s scattered across 25 miles. Some planes dropped their sticks 30 miles from assigned zones. Others dumped paratroopers directly over German positions. The 101st Airborne planned 6 specific drop zones. These zones covered 15 square miles. Actual dispersion covered 9 miles by 25 miles. This totaled 230 square miles. This was 15 times larger than planned. Pathfinders on Drop Zone Alpha missed their zone entirely. They set up equipment 1 mile off target at Saint-Germain-de-Varaville. Pathfinders on Drop Zone. Charlie lost most of their equipment when a plane ditched in the English Channel. They erected 1 Eureka beacon minutes before the main force arrived. There were no lights, just 1 beacon. Drop Zone Torres landing was catastrophic for the 507th Parachute Regiment. Only 2% of transports dropped accurately on target. 38 planes, an entire battalion, dumped their sticks into flooded marshland. The murder at river swamps ran 3 to 8 feet deep. Paratroopers carried 130 pounds of equipment strapped tight to their bodies. Parachute harnesses lacked quick release mechanisms. Many paratroopers never surfaced. 36 bodies were recovered from one section of swamp alone. This was an entire platoon. They drowned in less than 8 feet of water. Richard Winters landed hard near Sainte-Mère-Église. He was in the wrong drop zone. His equipment bundle tore away during descent. Inside were his M1 rifle, ammunition, grenades, and rations. All of it was gone. He had a compass. He had a knife. He had a pistol with one magazine. That was all he had. Around him were darkness, distant gunfire, and the drone of C-47s still overhead. Standard doctrine called for waiting. It also advised orienting, finding the rally point, and connecting with one's unit. Winters did not wait. He checked his compass. He identified north by watching the C-47 flight paths. The paths crossed the peninsula southwest to northeast. This was simple triangulation. His objective lay near Sainte-Marie-du-Mont. This was to the southeast. He started moving. Within 200 yards, he found Private John Hall of Able Company. Private Hall had lost his radio equipment. Private Hall asked if Winters knew where they were. Winters replied that they were in Normandy. He suggested they find more men. They moved through hedgerows. This was the famous bocage, with its stone walls, earthen berms, and dense vegetation. It was perfect for ambushes. They used hand clickers, which were cricket noisemakers issued to 100 first paratroopers. 1 click meant challenge. 2 clicks meant response. They exchanged clicks. Second Lieutenant Carwood Lipton appeared. Then 2 more men from the 82nd Airborne Division joined them. There were now 5 men. They were from mixed units. They had no heavy weapons. They kept moving. They soon found Private Donald Malarkey, Private Robert Wynne, Corporal Joseph Toy, and Sergeant William Guarnere. Guarnere was angry. His brother Henry had just been killed at Cassino, Italy. Sergeant Guarnere wanted Germans dead. Following train tracks southeast, they heard horses. Winters signaled for them to stop. A German patrol approached. It consisted of maybe a dozen men. They were 80 yards away. Winters positioned his small group. He aimed their weapons at specific points and established fields of fire. Guarnere opened fire early. Winters sharply reprimanded Guarnere, but the Germans scattered. The firefight lasted 90 seconds. 4 Germans were down. 1 was wounded. The group kept moving. They found more paratroopers hanging dead from trees. Germans had shot them while they dangled helplessly. Malarkey took an M1 rifle from a dead trooper. Winters grabbed a German 98K carabiner. This was better than a pistol. Near the rally point at Le Grand Chemin, they encountered German prisoners of war. These had already been captured by other 100 first elements. One prisoner spoke perfect English. He stated he was from Eugene, Oregon. This ethnic German had returned to the fatherland to fight. Malarkey stared. The surreal nature of war was crystallizing before him. Then they heard Lieutenant Ronald Spears from Dog Company dealing with other prisoners. Gunshots rang out. The group did not look back. By 400 hours, Winters reached Le Grand Chemin. This was a farmhouse serving as temporary battalion headquarters. Colonel Robert Strayer, Major Oliver Horton, and Captain Clarence Hester were there. There were also fragments of Easy Company. Perhaps 20 men were present from a company that should have had 140. Colonel Strayer asked where Meehan was. Winters replied that he had not seen him. Colonel Strayer then told Winters that he was the acting company commander. He ordered Winters to find his men. Winters now commanded what remained of Easy Company. 11 men were present. They were mixed with stragglers from other units. The total was perhaps 15 to 17 troopers. This was not a full company. It was barely a reinforced squad. Additionally, the Germans were firing artillery from somewhere close. In fact, it was very close. What happened next would be taught at West Point for the next 80 years. Stay with me. It was 8:30 hours. Winters heard them before he saw them, hearing the distinctive whoomp, whoomp, whoomp of heavy artillery. These were German 105mm howitzers. There were 4 of them located perhaps 330 yards south. They were firing northeast toward Utah Beach. Captain Hester grabbed Winters and told him there was fire along that hedgerow. He ordered Winters to take care of it. That was the entire briefing. There was no map. There was no intelligence. There was no backup plan. The order was simply to take care of it. Winters grabbed Lieutenant Lewis Nixon, Easy Company's intelligence officer, and told him to come along. They crawled to the hedgerow. They looked south across open fields toward Brecourt Manor. They saw 4 gun emplacements with earthen berms and connecting trenches. At least 2 MG-42 machine gun positions covered the approaches. Winters counted German helmets. There were a minimum of 40 to 50 men, possibly more. Winters had maybe 12 men. The Germans had 105mm howitzers, MG-42s, with a 1,200 rounds per minute rate of fire and fortified positions. Easy Company had M1 rifles, a few Thompson submachine guns, and grenades. It was math again. This was the brutal kind. Earlier that morning, other elements of the 506th had stumbled onto these guns. However, they had been repulsed. They were driven back by withering machine gun fire. Now it was Winters' turn. He could refuse. He could say it was impossible. He could wait for armor support. However, every minute he waited, more Americans died on Utah Beach. Exit 2 off the beach ran straight through fields of fire from those howitzers. The 4th Infantry Division was wading ashore right now. Engineers, tank crews, and artillery teams were all exposed. The German guns were slaughtering them. Winters made his decision in 10 seconds. He went back to Le Grand Chemin. He started collecting volunteers. From Easy Company, he gathered Lipton, Compton, Guarnere, and Malarkey. He also called on Ranney, Toy, Liebgate, and Wynne. From Able Company, he called on Private John Hall. From Headquarters Company came Privates Gerald Lorraine and Virgil Red Kimberling. From Fox Company came Private Walter Hicks and Sergeant Julius Rusty Hauk. This made 13 men total, including Winters. He explained the plan. The plan involved fire and maneuver. Machine guns would provide a base of fire. An assault team would flank the first gun. They would throw grenades, then spike the gun. After that, they would move down the trench to the next one and repeat the process. The plan was simple and direct. It would be suicidal if executed poorly. He asked if there were any questions. Guarnere asked when they would start. Winters replied, "Now." Winters positioned Sergeant Carwood Lipton and Private Joseph Liebgott with the only .30 caliber machine gun they had. He instructed them to shoot at anything that moved near those guns. He sent Lieutenant Lynn Buck Compton, Private Donald Malarkey, and Sergeant William Guarner to the right flank. He told them to wait for his signal. Then they were to hit that machine gun nest with everything they had. Everyone else was to provide covering fire. Winters lay in 1-foot-high Norman grass. He was 60 yards from the first gun emplacement. He could see German helmets bobbing in the trench. His heart hammered. His mouth was dry. His hands remained steady. He had trained for this at Camp Takua for 18 months. He had run Currahee Mountain until his legs screamed. He had practiced fire and maneuver until he could do it unconsciously. Now it was real. A German helmet rose above the trench parapet. Winters fired 2 shots. The helmet dropped. Winters yelled, "Go!" Compton, Malarkey, and Guarnere charged from the right. Lipton and Liebgott opened up with the machine gun. Tracers ripped through the air. The German MG-42 answered with a sustained burst of fire. Malarkey crawled forward through the grass. His carbine was ready. Winters realized Malarkey was out of ammunition. He only had grenades. Winters yelled for Malarkey to wait and get back. Malarkey scrambled back. Winters then told Compton that it was his turn. Buck Compton had a borrowed Thompson submachine gun. He had never fired one before. He crawled forward. The grass parted around him. Rounds snapped overhead. He advanced 50 yards, then 40 yards, then 30 yards. The machine gun nest then went quiet. Compton stood. He charged. He threw 2 grenades into the first gun position. 2 loud explosions followed. Smoke billowed. Screams echoed. Winters and the others rushed forward. They hit the trench. Inside were 4 Germans. 2 were dead. 1 was wounded. 1 was surrendering. The wounded German raised his hands. Blood soaked his uniform. Winters barked for the Germans to get out. They shoved the Germans back toward friendly lines. 1 gun was now down. There were 3 more to go. The trenches connecting the gun positions saved time. The Germans had dug them for easy resupply and reinforcement. Now those same trenches became Easy Company's covered approach. Winters led the assault team down the trench. They moved in single file, watching for Germans. The second gun sat 30 yards south. They could hear German voices shouting orders. Winters threw a grenade. He waited for the explosion, then charged. The crew was scrambling. They were trying to traverse the howitzer to fire down the trench. They were too slow. Winters shot the gunner. Compton shot the loader. Guarneri bayoneted a 3rd German trying to climb out. They disabled the breach with a gammon grenade. This was a British explosive designed exactly for this purpose. A loud boom followed. The howitzer split open. It was permanently out of action. 2 guns were now down. Behind them, German reinforcements were moving up. More machine gun fire raked the field. Private Robert Popeye Wynne took 1 round through the shoulder. Winters shouted for them to get him back. 2 men dragged Wynne toward Legrand, Chemin. Winters needed more men. He sent Private Hall back to battalion. Winters told him to get reinforcements immediately. Hall ran, sprinting across open ground. He did not make it. A German mine or mortar caused his death. The reports varied. Private John D. Hall was 22 years old and from Able Company. He was one of the first men Winters found after landing. Hall was dead. Winters did not have time to process this loss. The 3rd gun was 40 yards to the south. They moved. The 3rd gun emplacement was larger. Winters saw why. It was a command post with radio equipment, a field telephone, and maps. Winters noticed the maps. He grabbed them and stuffed them into his jacket. The Germans were now retreating. They fell back toward the Brecourt Manor house. Machine guns there provided covering fire. However, Easy Company had momentum. Winters threw another grenade into the 3rd gun position. He followed this with rifle fire. The German crew abandoned the gun. A gammon grenade exploded. 3 guns were now destroyed. Only 1 remained. Ammunition was running low. The men were exhausted. They had been fighting for 90 minutes straight. Then Lieutenant Ronald Spears appeared. Spears was from Dog Company. He had a reputation for ruthlessness. Rumors stated that he had executed German prisoners of war earlier that morning. Winters did not care about rumors. He needed firepower. He asked Spears if he had men. Spears replied that he had 5 men. Winters said that was enough. He told Spears to hit the last gun from the south. Winters added that he would support from his position. Spears did not hesitate. He charged across 50 yards of open field. This was directly through German machine gun fire. Tracers zipped past him. Rounds kicked up dirt at his feet. He did not slow down. His 5 men followed him. They hit the 4th gun position with immense force. Grenades exploded. Thompson submachine guns fired. Screaming filled the air. The German crew broke formation. They ran toward Brecourt Manor. Spears disabled the 4th howitzer with another gammon grenade. All 4 guns were now destroyed. 2 hours had elapsed. American casualties included 1 killed, Private Hall, 2 others were wounded, Private Wynne and 1 other soldier. German casualties were unknown. At least 15 were dead, and perhaps 20 were wounded. Dozens more were retreating. Winters pulled out the maps he had grabbed from the command post. The maps showed everything. They detailed every German artillery position on the Cotentin Peninsula. This included every machine gun nest, every strong point, and every defensive position. These extended from Utah Beach to Cherbourg. This represented a complete intelligence breakdown of German defenses. He sprinted to Le Grand Chemin. There he found Lewis Nixon. He told Lewis Nixon to look at the maps. Nixon's eyes widened. Winters ordered Nixon to take the maps to regiment headquarters immediately. Nixon ran the 3 miles to Utah Beach. By 1100 hours, the maps reached division headquarters. By 1200 hours, the first 2 Sherman tanks reached Utah Beach. They were directed by those maps. These tanks destroyed German positions with precision fire. The intelligence windfall from Bracourt Manor saved hundreds of American lives over the next 48 hours. But Winters did not know that yet. He just knew his first man was dead. Private John Hall was 22 years old. His family at the farmhouse received notification 6 weeks later. Winters sat outside the farmhouse at Le Grand Chemin. The sound of artillery from Utah Beach had changed. There was less German fire and more American fire. The guns were silent now. The causeway was open. The 4th Infantry Division was pushing inland. Winters had accomplished his mission. However, Private Hall was still dead. That night, Winters wrote in his journal, he thanked God for seeing him through that day of days. He prayed he would make it through D-Day +1. If he somehow managed to get home again, he promised God and himself that he would find a quiet piece of land somewhere. He would spend the rest of his life in peace. He never forgot that promise. The destruction of the Bracourt Manor Battery had immediate tactical consequences. Utah Beach's Exit 2 opened by 0730 hours. The 4th Infantry Division pushed inland. They did so without the devastating artillery fire that had been falling minutes before. By noon on D-Day, 21,000 American troops were ashore at Utah. 197 vehicles also landed. In addition, 1,695 tons of supplies arrived. Casualties totaled 197 killed, wounded, or missing. In comparison, Omaha Beach suffered 2,400 casualties. Utah succeeded partly because paratroopers silenced German guns inland. Bracourt Manor was the most critical gun battery. The German 6th Parachute Regiment had planned to use those howitzers as mobile artillery. They intended to move them at night, set up, and fire on beach exits. Then they would relocate before Allied naval guns could target them. Winters destroyed that plan. Furthermore, the impact went beyond one day. Colonel Robert Sink commanded the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. He reported the action to 7th Corps headquarters. 7th Corps forwarded the report to 1st Army. 1st Army then forwarded it to Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. General Dwight Eisenhower reviewed the after-action report. The Bracourt Manor assault became a training case study. This raises a question. Why? Winters accomplished an impossible mission with minimal casualties. He used textbook small unit tactics. First, he emphasized reconnaissance. Winters personally scouted the objective before committing forces. Second, he established a base of fire. Machine guns suppressed enemy positions while assault teams maneuvered. Third, he used a flanking attack. A frontal assault was always avoided. Forces approached from an unexpected angle. Fourth, he employed fire and movement. One element would shoot while another element moved. This maintained constant pressure. Fifth, he exploited the situation. Enemy infrastructure, such as the trenches, was used to maintain momentum. Sixth, he demonstrated adaptability. When reinforcements like Spears arrived, they were integrated immediately. Seventh, he focused on intelligence gathering. Enemy documents were seized and passed up the chain of command quickly. By 1945, the Bracourt Manor assault was taught at the infantry school at Fort Benning. By 1950, it appeared in Army field manuals. By 1960, West Point included it in their tactical curriculum. Today, every Army officer learns the Bracourt Manor assault. It serves as a textbook example of small unit leadership. The principles Winters demonstrated are still valid. Simple plans work better than complex ones. Personal reconnaissance is irreplaceable. Leaders lead from the front. Mission accomplishment requires acceptable risk. Winters embodied all of them. Richard Davis. Winters was born on January 21, 1918. This occurred in New Holland, Pennsylvania. It was a small town, a quiet farming community. His father Richard worked various jobs. His mother Edith was reserved but kind. As a teenager, Winters worked odd jobs. He saved money for college. He attended Franklin and Marshall College. He graduated in August 1941 with a degree in economics. The draft was active. Winters enlisted voluntarily to shorten his service obligation. This meant 1 year instead of 3. He never imagined he would spend 4 years at war. Basic training took place at Camp Croft, South Carolina. His platoon leader was incompetent. This leader once lectured for an hour about the M1 Garand while holding a Springfield M 1903 rifle. Winters thought he could do better than that. He applied for officer candidate school at Fort Benning, Georgia. He graduated on July 2, 1942, as a second lieutenant. At officer candidate school, he met Lewis Nixon. They became lifelong friends. Winters volunteered for the paratroopers. These were considered the best of the best. He arrived at Camp Toccoa, Georgia, in August 1942. He was assigned to Easy Company, 2nd Battalion, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. His company commander was First Lieutenant Herbert Sobel. Sobel was a harsh and unforgiving disciplinarian. He drove Easy Company harder than any other unit. Training involved Currahee Mountain. It was 3 miles up and 3 miles down with a full pack every day. Winters ran it 147 times during training. Of 5,000 volunteers for the 506th, only 1,800 made it through. Easy Company became one of the elite units in the 101st Airborne Division. However, Sobel and Winters clashed. Sobel recommended Winters for a court-martial over trivial infractions. Winters challenged these charges. Several non-commissioned officers threatened to resign if Sobel remained in command. Colonel Sink resolved the issue. Sobel transferred out, and First Lieutenant Thomas Meehan took command. Winters became executive officer. That is where things stood on June 5, 1944. Easy Company boarded C-47s for Normandy on that day. Meehan commanded. Winters was second in command. Then Meehan's plane exploded at 01:15 hours on June 6th. Then Winters commanded. He was 26 years old. On July 1, 1944, Winters was promoted to captain. On July 2, 1944, General Omar Bradley personally presented Winters with the Distinguished Service Cross. The citation stated, "The citation commended First Lieutenant Winters. With 7 enlisted men, he advanced through intense enemy automatic weapons fire. He put out of action 2 guns of a battery of 488 mm guns. These were shelling the beachhead. First Lieutenant Winters showed unswerving determination to complete his self-appointed and extremely hazardous task. He and his group withdrew for reinforcements. He then returned with tank support. The remaining 2 guns were put out of action, which decreased opposition to the forces landing on the beaches. A note added that the citation incorrectly stated 88 mm guns. The weapons were actually 105 mm howitzers. Winters was recommended for the Medal of Honor. However, Army regulations allowed only 1 Medal of Honor per division for each operation. Lieutenant Colonel Robert G. Cole of the 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment had already been awarded the Medal of Honor. This was for actions near Carentan on June 11, 1944. Winters received the Distinguished Service Cross instead. This was the second highest award for combat valor. He never complained. In September 1944, Operation Market Garden took place in the Netherlands. On October 5, 1944, Winters led a squad against a large German force near a crossroads. They assaulted successfully. It was later discovered that at least 300 Germans were in that position. On October 9, 1944, Winters was promoted to battalion executive officer. In December 1944, the Battle of the Bulge occurred in Bastogne. Winters helped coordinate the defense of Foy. The 101st Airborne held against 15 German divisions for nearly a week. In January 1945, an attack on Foy occurred. Winters directed this assault. In March 1945, he was promoted to major. He became acting battalion commander when Lieutenant Colonel Strayer moved to regimental staff. In May 1945, Germany surrendered. Easy Company reached Berchtesgaden, including Hitler's Eagle's Nest. They drank champagne from Hitler's wine cellar. This marked victory in Europe. Winters had survived. Richard Winters left active duty in November 1945. He returned to Pennsylvania. He married Ethel Estopy in 1948. They had 2 children. He worked for his friend Lewis Nixon's family business, the Nixon Nitration Works. He rose to general manager. In 1951, the Korean War began. Winters was recalled to active duty. He served at Fort Dix, New Jersey as a training officer. He petitioned not to deploy to Korea, and his petition was granted. He left the Army permanently in 1951. Winters retired to Hershey, Pennsylvania in 1972. He started a business selling chocolate byproducts as animal feed. He retired from business in 1997. For decades, Winters lived quietly. Few people knew his war record. Then in 1992, historian Stephen Ambrose published Band of Brothers. This book chronicled Easy Company, the 506th Regiment, and the 101st Airborne. It covered their journey from Normandy to Hitler's Eagle's Nest. The book told Winters' story and Easy Company's story. In 2001, HBO adapted it into a 10-part miniseries called Band of Brothers. Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks produced the series. Actor Damian Lewis portrayed Winters. The series won 6 Emmy Awards. Suddenly, Richard Winters was famous. He hated it. Winters refused most interview requests. He avoided publicity and declined speaking engagements. When forced to speak, he always deflected credit. He often said that he was not a hero. Instead, he had served in a company full of them. His grandson once asked if he had been a hero in the war. Winters replied that he had not been a hero. However, he had served in a company of heroes. He meant it. In his final years, Winters suffered from Parkinson's disease. On January 2, 2011, Richard Winters died peacefully. He was 92 years old and passed away in a nursing home near Hershey, Pennsylvania. He is buried in Ephrata, Pennsylvania, next to his parents. He has a simple headstone with no fanfare. Brecourt Manor still stands. It is a working dairy farm. The de Vallivier family has owned it since 1944. The gun positions still remain. They are 4 depressions in the earth, connected by overgrown trenches. In 2008, a monument was erected near the battlefield. A bronze statue depicts Richard Winters. He is running forward with an M1 Garand. The inscription reads, "Leadership." Every year on June 6th, veterans gather there. Families and historians join them. They walk the field where Winters and Easy Company fought. The farm owners graciously allow these visitors. Inside Brecourt Manor, photographs line the walls. These photos show veterans returning and shaking hands with the family. Donald Malarkey visited in 2005. Lynn Buck Compton visited in 2007. They signed photographs and left notes. One note read, "We will never forget." The Normandy American Cemetery at Colleville-sur-Mer contains 9,388 graves. Private John D. Hall is not among them. His body was recovered and returned to his family. However, hundreds of Easy Company's brother paratroopers rest there. Crosses and stars of David stretch in perfect rows toward the sea. Each one represents a paratrooper who jumped into darkness on June 6, 1944. Each one represents a son, brother, husband, or father who never came home. West Point continues teaching the Brecourt Manor assault. Officers analyze Winters' decisions and debate alternatives. They learn valuable leadership principles. These lessons remain timeless. Small units can defeat larger forces through superior tactics. Leadership matters more than firepower. Initiative wins battles. Courage is contagious. Richard Winters demonstrated all of these in 2 hours on a Norman field. The Americans who jumped into Normandy on June 6, 1944, understood the statistics. Paratroopers suffered the highest casualty rate of any branch in World War II. 40% of airborne troops became casualties during major operations. They volunteered despite these odds. They came from every state. These included farm boys from Iowa, factory workers from Michigan, and college graduates from California. They knew the challenges. They served anyway. Lieutenant Thomas Meehan III was 26 years old. He was from Buffalo, New York. Meehan served as commanding officer of Easy Company. He was killed when his C-47 was shot down at 1:15 in the morning. Private John D. Hall was 22 years old. He was from Able Company. He was one of the first men Winters rallied. Hall was killed during the Brecourt Manor assault. Corporal Lester Heglin was 24 years old. He was from Easy Company. Heglin was killed during the Normandy campaign. Private Robert Wynne, known as Popeye, survived his wound at Brecourt Manor. He died later in Holland. Easy Company lost 49 men killed during World War II. The 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment lost 484 men killed. The 101st Airborne Division lost 2,499 men just on D-Day. These were not just statistics. They were real people. They had families, dreams, and plans for after the war. They sacrificed everything so Europe could be free. This is why stories like this matter. These men left behind patrol reports, radio messages, and medal citations. However, those documents cannot convey the true experience. They cannot describe jumping through flak at 600 feet. Nor can they describe crawling through grass toward German machine guns. They also cannot convey watching friends die in a Norman field. Official history records that Richard Winters destroyed 4 howitzers. He did this with 13 men against a force of 50. However, it does not tell us about the fear or exhaustion. It also omits the weight of command in the faces of men who did not come back. Private Hall volunteered to get reinforcements. He ran across open ground. He died in the attempt. Winters carried that heavy weight for 67 years. He never forgot Hall's name, nor the others. In 2006, Winters published his memoir. Its title was Beyond Band of Brothers, The War Memoirs of Major Dick Winters. In his memoir, Winters wrote about the real enemy in combat. He explained that it was fear, not the other person. Winters stated that the greatest weapon against fear is courage. He defined courage as taking action despite fear. Richard Winters took action despite fear on June 6, 1944. Private Hall, Lieutenant Meehan, and thousands of other paratroopers did the same. They are why we are here today. If this story moved you as it moved us, please do us a favor. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We rescue forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. These are stories about paratroopers, sailors, pilots, and soldiers. They changed warfare, saved lives, and refused to quit. These are stories of real people and real heroism. Please, drop a comment right now. Tell us where you are watching from. Are you in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, the Philippines, or India? Our community stretches across the entire world. You are not just a viewer. You are part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Let us know if someone in your family served. Just let us know you are here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for ensuring Lieutenant Richard Winters and the men of Easy Company do not disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered. You are helping make that happen.